Alright, YouTube, there's some more, there's something rotten in Denmark here, and it's been planned out for some time, and that's Obama wants the unilateral ability to turn over the internet essentially at large, when what it really boils down to, from being a U.S. firm, U.S. owned, U.S. regulated, predominantly taking place in the U.S., to the world at large, which means essentially the UN, the Chinese, the Russians, and so forth. Can you say bad idea? Now, I remember years ago people were speculating that this would happen. There was already some talk. Obama wants, the actual corporation, the actual firm that assigns the names and numbers on the internet to be an international, a globalized thing instead of being within just the United States itself. And there was pushback at the time. People said, well, why would that? What's the purpose? Things on the internet are working fine as they are. It's not like the United States applies a whole bunch of burdensome regulations to these systems. In fact, it's the last free market on the face of the earth. There's a reason why the internet does so well, even while everything else is kind of stagnant. There's a reason why the internet is a place for the free exchange of ideas that really drives technology. We can't keep thinking of the internet as just some sort of intangible asset where people go and they pay money to get on the internet, they get their Wi-Fi or whatever, their broadband hookup, and they go and they just make YouTube videos, or they just fundraise, or they just go on Facebook or some other social media site. We have to begin looking at it as a human asset of far, far greater importance than simply its component parts, as being, well, here you can put videos here, you can chat with people here. It has a much, much greater role in this world. A lot of the technology really driving the engines of ingenuity today, they start when a bunch of fucking people on the internet, they fundraise, they do some crowdfunding, and all of a sudden something new takes off. Things are marketed on the internet. I make a large proportion of all of my money through the internet, either through book sales, which is through Amazon, through Patreon. So I'm basically getting money for making YouTube videos. All of that is put in peril if we switch from the mostly unregulated system of United States control, where the government, honestly, for the most part, has taken a hands-off approach. I know they want to institute, like, net neutrality, and I agree that companies shouldn't be throttling bandwidth to sites for not paying more or something. That's okay. I don't think we need the whole doctrine of net neutrality to do that. I think that the government wants to tax things, honestly. But this move is quite clearly for two purposes. Obama, who gets a lot of money and the promise of a lot of future money, along with his cronies and buddies, from international groups as opposed to just from within the nation, wants to turn over the keys of the most important asset of modern times from the United States to the international community, primarily for two reasons. One, in his delusion, he believes that it will increase relations between nations, which is utterly and completely wrong. It'll do the opposite, because people in the United States will cry foul the first time that international censorship is applied to it. And number two, taxation and fees, to make it more expensive, to get more income, especially for governments from it. The United States, predominantly, is responsible for the development of what we call the internet. We invented it. The United States, it is a U.S. asset. Obama has absolutely no unilateral right as an executive to turn over this firm that is responsible for divvying out the web addresses to the international community. And several lawsuits have already been filed, and I strongly support them. I think everything needs to be done. People are sorely underestimating the economic damage that it would do. If the internet falls into the hands of the UN or some other multinational body that proceeds to carve it up, that proceeds to build a bunch of firewalls everywhere so you just have a bunch of intranets with their own rules and intricacies, begins to censor it. For instance, one thing that a lot of these multinational groups like the UN really want, you shouldn't be able to criticize people based on their religious views. You shouldn't be able to criticize people based on political views if those political views are considered sacrosanct To the right wing, of course, right now, the left's views are sacrosanct on things like immigration. There was a time not long ago when the right-wing views on something like Christianity, Judeo-Christian dogma, were considered sacrosanct in a lot of parts of the West. This will simply overly politicize the web to the point at which you will have an ever-changing slew of rules and regulations and fees associated with its use, to the point at which, right now, the internet systems, generally falling under the control of the U.S., allow web firms to protect, to a great degree, freedom of speech and freedom of expression. It keeps the cost down. Other nations generally don't have a problem with the fact that this is a U.S. group doing this because they don't impose any significant regulatory burden on them. That's why it's essentially still a free market, more or less. It's certainly a lot more free than any of the more tangible world markets that exist out there. The second that it's turned over to some multinational group attempting to govern it, what's to prevent a bunch of other nations saying, hey, people shouldn't be able to criticize religion because we've got blasphemy laws, and they can arbitrate this in a world court as opposed to having to deal with the U.S. Constitution? What you will end up with is probably they'll be the ones that get sided with. Because the U.S. will no longer have leverage to say, well, our people expect to be able to speak freely on the web, and these firms are located in the U.S., because it'll be multinational. It'll no longer be a U.S. system. The fact is that U.S. companies, governed under U.S. law, have a great deal of resistance to things. Look at what Erdogan does. He blocks access to like Twitter and Facebook every time there's a protest. Look at what the Russians do. They've instituted laws against mean political memes about Vladimir Putin. Look at what the Chinese have done. They're so dead set on censoring things, they don't even hook up to the main internet at large outside of like business endeavors or academics. Everybody else uses an internal and intranet system. Look at like North Korea. What's to prevent a nation like North Korea from going to a world court and arbitrating there and saying, hey, we've got all sorts of laws against slandering Kim Jong-un. Maybe we should have regulations against that. I know it sounds pie in the sky, like really out there, like, oh, that could never happen. The reason why you consider it impossible for that to happen is because for decades and decades, the internet has operated under the U.S. Constitution. That's what protects the very concept of free speech on the internet. You give that away, you don't get more freedom. It certainly doesn't help the U.S. economy. How is it going to help us? We get zero benefit and a great deal of potential struggle down the road, and a move that is probably not even legal for Obama to undergo. There's a reason you don't even just have Republicans crying foul about this. Plenty of Democrats have weighed in, people from Obama's own party saying this is not a good idea. He's set a date for October 1st. In the meantime, we have, thus, a month and a half to whine and bitch and complain and spread the word that he's trying to do this. And this should not boil down to a partisan issue. I would like to think that Democrats within the United States, you believe in gay rights, right? Do you want the Saudi Arabians to be able to say, hey, there shouldn't be homosexual stuff on YouTube, there shouldn't be homosexuals on Facebook, and go and arbitrate it based on their religious views? Who's going to stop them? The United States? Well, that would be great, except we'd no longer be in control of assigning the numbers and names to internet sites. What's to... You support women's rights. What's to prevent some totalitarian dictatorship from saying, well, in this country, women can't vote, women can't do this, that, and the other thing, and we have a problem because we don't want our women to absorb this heretical content that tells them that they can be free, that they can do what they want. What if you have some fucking racist regime? They say, well, we're tired of seeing so many black people on here, so many Asians on here. What if the Japanese decide, oh, well, you know, this Wikipedia article on Chinese culture is too kind and doesn't talk about this genocide or that pogrom, and so you have to insert it. And then the Chinese say, oh, what about what the Japanese did? You know what's going to end up happening? It's going to be like everything else at the goddamn UN, where you spend decades and decades debating and launching inquiries and launching your strongly worded letters of protest, and nothing gets done, except that you have more censorship in the interim period. Things end up costing a lot of money because that's inevitably what happens, and every Tom, Dick, and Harry in a position of authority anywhere in the world, whether it's someone who is elected, somebody who rose to power in a monarchical fashion, or some group of oligarchs that like happen to run a country like Russia or Venezuela or something, these people will have the legal wherewithal to drag everything through the court system, clogging up everything globally as they try to get their slice of the internet pie that they didn't even help create in the first place. I'm going to go full ethnocentric mode here. The United States is responsible for creating this gargantuan engine of prosperity. It should be ours to benefit from. And in the meantime, every other country that values freedom of expression in any way, shape, or form, they derive the benefits along with us. Only the most despotic tin-horn dictatorships, which stand the most to gain from Obama's actions here, could possibly dislike the current state of the internet. I think it's pretty damn good. Some person in Nigeria, they can log in to some site on the internet, they can make YouTube videos and have a Facebook, and do whatever they want. Somebody in Malaysia, some North Korean defector. It doesn't matter who they are, they can put their opinions on there if they want, and generally speaking, beyond the most rudimentary courtesies extended by companies, other than Twitter, which is heavily censored now and uses algorithms to demote content they happen not to like. Here on YouTube, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen here. It doesn't really happen on Facebook, for the most part. Zuckerberg's a little bit politicized. Think about how much worse it would be if all of those government officials and judges and internet firms from other countries could stick their dick in and stir it around a little bit. So we must stop Obama at all costs from doing this. It requires massive public outrage. Not enough people know that this is going on because the big reporting on it happened a couple years ago and people then forgot about it over time. That shouldn't happen. We need to wake people up, put it back in the public consciousness, and we need to say, fuck you, Obama, you're not going to do this. It's a terrible idea. You've got half the Democratic Party telling you it's a bad idea, and he just sits there pretending he can do it unilaterally, to the point at which some idiot like Ted Cruz is the one leading the charge against it. Where's Rand Paul? Why isn't he spoken up? I want to see more Rand Paul on this train. I want to see Bernie Sanders speak up and say, yeah, it's probably not a great idea. Didn't we build the internet as it is now? Is the U.S. Constitution lacking in some capability to constrain government from screwing around the internet? You know, you got enough screwing around by the U.S. government alone on the internet as far as free speech goes. What do you think's going to happen when the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and Saudi Arabians, the Israelis, the Palestinians, the Syrians, South Africans, Brazilians, everybody else in the world gets to do the same thing, and there will be no specific reason why in any of that arbitration the United States word will mean anything more than North Korea's. It won't, because it will no longer be under U.S. doctrine. It is an extremely dangerous thing that Obama is trying to do here. He doesn't have public support on this. If you were to poll everybody in the country, I'm sure, actually conduct a poll and say, do you think that we should turn over essentially control of the internet to the broader world community? I bet 99% of them would say no. It'd be almost universal agreement that his plan is a bad plan. So why on earth wouldn't we say something? Well, I will. You know, I've got a bully pulpit here in front of over 30,000 people. Some of you have even more subscribers. Make a video, make a tweet, make a Facebook group about it or something. Do everything in our power to stop it, because it's probably the worst idea Obama's had. Now, I've given Obama credit for very little, like Cuban deal, that was good. Get out of the way of the oil boom, that's great. Most things I don't politically agree with Obama on, but there's very little there that I so heavily despise that it's really even worth the time making a video. Obamacare, oh, well, it's ineffective. Okay, well, it's just another ineffective government program. This is way worse than ineffective. And it wouldn't matter if Trump were to suggest the same thing. I'd say, is Trump nuts? Is he fucking crazy? If Gary Johnson were to do it, is Gary Johnson fucking crazy? Obama must be nuts to think this is a good idea. It doesn't give us anything. We get a shit deal, and we get nothing in return. That's about all. Peace out.